If you see the red door, run. My terrifying night in a remote cabin. They told me the cabin was rustic. What they didn't tell me was that once you're inside, you might never leave. I'm sharing this because I need someone, anyone, to believe me. It sounds insane, but I know what I experienced, and no one can tell me it wasn't real. It all started when I booked a last-minute cabin for a weekend away. I needed the escape after my recent breakup, and a secluded spot in the woods sounded perfect. The listing was bare bones, no Wi-Fi, no TV, just peace and quiet in nature. The only photo in the ad showed a small, cozy cabin in a forest clearing, with a single-sentence description: rustic getaway for those looking to unplug. I figured it would be rough around the edges, but I was ready to get away from everything and everyone for a couple of days. So, I booked it and drove up that Friday, my phone nearly dead by the time I reached the area. GPS stopped working about 5 miles from the cabin, but I followed the directions from the host's message. Once you pass the bent oak tree, take a left down the dirt path. You'll know the cabin when you see it. The cabin. After about 20 minutes of bumping down the narrow, overgrown trail, I saw it, a small cabin in a forest clearing, just like in the listing. It had a bit of a creepy vibe, but that could have just been my nerves. It was isolated, I'll give it that. No other cabins or homes nearby, and I hadn't seen a single car since turning onto the dirt path. The cabin itself looked old, with a weathered wood exterior and a slanted roof. But what struck me most was the red door. Bright, almost garish against the muted brown of the wood, it looked freshly painted, like it was the only part of the cabin someone cared to maintain. I found it odd but brushed it off. I was here to relax, not judge the aesthetic choices of whoever owned this place. I stepped inside, and the air was stale, like the place hadn't been aired out in months. The inside was simple: a small living room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with just the basics, and a tiny bedroom at the back. The furniture was sparse, and everything had a layer of dust. It didn't take long for the weirdness to start. The first night, I was jolted awake by a loud thud. I lay there in the pitch dark, straining to listen, but the sound didn't repeat. I told myself it was just an animal outside and tried to go back to sleep. But the next day, things got stranger. I was out back, chopping wood, or at least trying to, when I noticed something odd in the tree line. At first, I thought it was just shadows, but as I looked closer, I could see it, a figure standing completely still between the trees, just barely visible. I called out, but it didn't move. I felt a chill run down my spine and quickly went back inside. After locking the door behind me, I peeked out the window, but the figure was gone. I convinced myself it was just a trick of the light or maybe a stray hiker, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the door creak open. I shot up, heart pounding, but the door was still shut. The sound had come from somewhere inside the cabin. I held my breath, straining to hear. That's when I noticed something chilling, the faint sound of breathing. It was coming from the living room. Slowly, I slid out of bed, moving as quietly as I could. The breathing was soft, but constant, like someone was trying to be silent but couldn't quite manage. I peeked around the corner, expecting to see someone standing there, but the room was empty. Yet the breathing continued, as if it were just a few feet in front of me. I backed up slowly, trying to make it to the bedroom, but then I saw it. The red door, the same one from the front of the cabin, was standing in the middle of the living room. It didn't make any sense. The door was supposed to be attached to the wall, leading outside. But here it was, freestanding, in the middle of the room. It was open a crack, and from the darkness beyond, the breathing grew louder. My mind raced. I told myself I was dreaming, that I'd wake up in my bed, safe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was real. My body felt heavy, my skin cold and clammy. I couldn't move, couldn't take my eyes off the door, and then it began to open slowly, as if inviting me inside. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come. I took a step back, my whole body trembling. The door opened wider, revealing a pitch-black void. I could feel a pull, like something was calling to me from within the darkness. But every instinct I had was screaming to run. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the cabin. I stumbled backward, nearly falling over. The red door was back in its rightful place at the front of the cabin, as if nothing had happened. I barely slept the rest of the night. The next day, I was ready to leave. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, but when I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. I twisted the knob, yanked, pushed, but it was like the door was glued shut. Panic started to set in, then I noticed the red door had moved again. It was now at the end of the hallway, leading to the bedroom. I couldn't believe it. Doors don't just move on their own. Desperate, I tried the windows, but they wouldn't open either. I even tried smashing one with a chair, but the glass didn't crack. I was trapped. The red door creaked open, beckoning me toward it. I could feel that pull again, a tug deep in my chest that told me to go inside, to see what was on the other side. But I fought it. I wasn't going to let this thing win. The day dragged on, the silence oppressive. Every time I looked away, the door would appear in a different place. Sometimes in the living room, sometimes in the kitchen. Always open, always waiting. By nightfall, I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. I knew I couldn't stay another night, but there was no way out. As darkness settled over the cabin, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I knew, deep down, that if I didn't go through the door, it would come for me. With no other choice, I stepped toward the door. The air around it was cold, and the darkness beyond was so complete that it seemed to swallow the light. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. I found myself in a small, dark room. The walls were covered in strange symbols, painted in what looked like rust or dried blood. In the center of the room was a single chair, facing away from me. As I approached, the breathing returned, louder than before. It was coming from the chair. I forced myself to walk around, and what I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. Sitting in the chair was me, but it wasn't just me. My skin was pale, my eyes sunken and lifeless, like a corpse. The figure looked up at me and grinned, its mouth stretching impossibly wide. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered, voice cold and hollow. I screamed and ran back through the door, but when I emerged, I wasn't in the cabin anymore. I was back in the forest, my car in front of me, keys in my hand. It was as if nothing had happened. I didn't waste any time. I jumped in my car and drove as fast as I could, not looking back. To this day, I don't know what that place was or why it wanted me. I tried contacting the listing's host, but the page was gone. There was no record of the cabin or my reservation. Sometimes, late at night, I hear breathing, soft and faint, like it's just outside my door. And I know, deep down, that the red door is still waiting for me. Somewhere? I wish I could say that things have gone back to normal since I escaped that cabin. But last night, I realized that whatever was in that place, it followed me. I woke up around AM to the sound of breathing. It was faint but unmistakable, like someone was standing right next to my bed, exhaling softly. I held my breath, listening, my heart racing. I was terrified to open my eyes, convinced that I'd see that figure, the version of myself I'd seen in the chair, pale and grinning. When I finally opened my eyes, my room was empty. But as I lay there, I noticed something strange. There was a mark on my bedroom door, small and almost unnoticeable. I got out of bed and walked over to examine it, and my stomach dropped. There, scratched faintly into the wood, were 5 letters. "Hello. It looked like it had been scratched from the inside of the door, as if someone or something had been trapped and trying to get out. I ran my fingers over the letters, my hands shaking. There was no way anyone could have done this. I live alone, and my door was locked from the inside. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was a leftover nightmare from my time at the cabin, maybe something I just hadn't noticed before. But then I saw it. The final piece of proof that made my blood run cold. In the faint moonlight coming through my window, I saw it, a small, vivid splash of red paint near the edge of the door. The same color as the red door in that cabin. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm being watched. Like any second, I'll look up and see that red door standing somewhere in my house, open and waiting. I tried calling a few friends, but every time, the line goes silent the moment I mention the cabin. It's as if the world itself refuses to acknowledge what I saw, what followed me home. But I know it's real. Tonight, I'm going to try setting up a camera in my bedroom to record while I sleep. If I see anything, I'll post another update here. If you're reading this and thinking about finding that cabin, don't.